Hey guys, it's Kieran. I hope you're doing great. Just going to do a quick full market update. So looking at the Bitcoin price action, recently it has been really boring in this recent price action, in this range bound market. But now finally we got this breakout. So you can see particularly, I'm going to pull out some really areas of demand and supply. So this is essentially a support box here that we had in the 4-hour time frame. And so far we are below it. And of course, the longer it hovers around here, the more ominous it becomes. But now what's interesting is that we've had this uptrend here. And now, if we actually break down, this is actually changing the character of it, because we've actually have a breakdown below this low. So a potential setup might be if we have a retracement to either of these supply boxes, either this one or this one, then you might have potentially like a lower high, and there could be a dump then afterwards. So that's something to consider. But it could either reject off this supply box or even this one. And what potential regions could we actually go down to? Well, I keep talking about this. So so a lot of you know that I even posted the Discord in the real time. You can check the MDX Algo Discord actually in the YouTube link below. It's an amazing community of like-minded traders and entrepreneurs. And particularly, I entered the short here between 31,573 and also 31,436. I explained my first take profit was actually, so it was 29,990, and then the second one was 29,630. Now my next take profit has been tagged up because I spoke about this session volume profile, and this is essentially areas of really high volume that price historically interacts with, and once price goes back again to it, then these high volume nodes really have an interaction with the price. And so we know, for example, when we were back here, this region here, 28.9K, 28.8, was a region of high volume here. Each of these boxes represent a 24-hour period in the session volume profile. So it's not at all surprising that we actually reacted off it here. And this was a take profit that I actually alerted people in the Discord group. And you can see here we actually rejected off it. And so that's something to consider as well. Now we have some more high volume nodes here left still. This one particularly here, you can see here. So this 31.1, 31.2K regions. That's something else I'm looking at. The only thing is that if we actually go back into, so now we've tapped that untap point of control. If we go back into this range now like this, then that could be a fake out. But the only thing is that when we actually broke down here, looking at the volume and things, a lot of the time in this volume, it was quite low volume and we were stuck in this range. But once we broke out, there's actually a huge volume spike. And so with this combined picture and everything else, this suggests to me that the sellers are still in control until proven otherwise. Something else also I want to also talk about is the long to short ratio. You can see particularly in all time frames from daily to lower time frames. Of course, the 15-minute one can change a lot, but particularly to day trading, the 15-minute is a bit more relevant. But you can see how the long to short ratio, essentially this is looking at what proportion of the market is net long, and you can see that a crazy amount of retail traders, legends, are just net long. So that's quite concerning. And also the open interest has also gone up. Open interest is the opening and closing of positions. And so this doesn't help people who are going long as well. The top traders are also decreasing long positions. And so overall, it seems that there is a bit more fuel to the downside. Looking at a more macro point of view, just something else to really consider as well. I mean, this is just something I've been playing around with. But if you look at this, I'm going to hide this actually right now. You can see here, there's somewhat like an ascending triangle. And a lot of you know I'm not a huge fan of trend lines because, of course, when a lot of people are looking at it, it's also subjective as well. But you can see how we had a first touch point here, second one here, and third one here. We also have touch points here. And so the thing is, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we do eventually have a pullback here to 27, 28K roughly. And then maybe you might get some kind of move like this, a compression, and then we break out that 36, 37K, that potentially 48K everyone's looking at. But again, the exact route is not 100% predictable. But then also you could have a move like this, bounce, and you could have a breakdown and a retest and then a short position like this. So it could go down as well. So this is something else I'm looking at. Of course, something to really be careful of, legends, is that whenever you've got second, third touch points, now the trend becomes a bit obvious. And when a lot of people are looking at the same thing, it doesn't always work out perfectly. And sometimes you might get deviation plays. So it's just something else that I'm also looking at. And in terms of actual support boxes and things, you can see here, legends, how on this run up here, there wasn't actually that much structure. You can see particularly this huge fair value gaps imbalances. So essentially when price goes back up in really fast in terms for the buyers, and there's not an opportunity to close the gap. And you can see there's a huge area of demand here and imbalances. Particularly the area of demand is particularly this zone here. So between 27K to 26.1, and also this one much lower as well, 25.8 to 24.7. So it's just something else I'm looking at. So perhaps we get a bounce either here or here, and this is just something else to, might be a potential long setup. So I mean, at least now, hopefully, I think a lot of participants are just so bored, they just want something to happen. Literally, anything is better than nothing. But these are just things that I'm looking at overall. And it's just something also crazy, right? When we were actually back here, in this 15.5k level, what was everybody thinking? Everybody was thinking, everyone, the dog, the grandmother was saying, okay, Bitcoin's going to go to 12, 14k. And it was fairly logical, right? Because 14k was roughly the 2019 high. And I myself thought we could go there. But what happened essentially here was that we actually front ran that by 2 to 3k. And similarly, here, when we were at 31k, what was everyone thinking? Everybody was thinking, well, we're going to 32 or 33k or 34k. But it didn't happen. It slightly front ran it. And what's interesting also is that 31k is exactly double of 15.5k. I mean, that might just be coincidence, but it's just interesting how the market never gives people exactly what they want. And I'm not saying 36, 48k can't happen. It's just the root always leaves the majority offside. So that's just something to consider as well. Let's look at the wider market legends as well. So looking at SPX. So I haven't entered the short position yet. I haven't, because SPX actually is still in a good uptrend. It's a healthy trend. And particularly, so this is like, I've separated these sections. This is one range here. So we have this range here between 4.23k to 4.8k. And then this is another range. So this is like 3.8k to 4.1k, and this 4.3k level is quite a strong one. It's quite an important one, but we're well above that. We pushed above like this, and we actually rejected of this point of control. But now we actually went well past it now. So next potential resistance for me is 4.6k, and perhaps you might get a move up like this and move back in the range. That might be a valid short setup. So this is something else I'm looking at as well. But you don't want to be getting or putting yourself in front of a train that's just charging at full speed. You want a clear change of structure. And that's something else to really consider as well. Looking at the Dixie, we have this actual downtrend now. The Dixie was in a downtrend, specifically like the last week. And so you can see how there's a series of lower highs. So lower high, lower high, lower. So perhaps we do get one final push up like this. And then we'll see if we actually tag this weekly level. This 98.22k level is quite important. If we do have a pullback up like this and then a push down, generally speaking, there is an inverse correlation between Dixie and risky assets like Bitcoin, all the stocks. And so in other words, when Dixie goes down, generally these risky assets generally do well. This is I'm also looking at as well. Looking at other things, for example, is the VIX as well. So looking at the VIX, you can see how particularly we are actually still below this low. Back in 2021, when the VIX was actually this low here, so around this level, this actually was coinciding with the top of the stock market and the crypto and equities, etc. And once this bounce happened, there was also a lot of bleeding for these stocks and equities. So potentially, I mean, this could be actual potential long setup as well. So if you want to open a long, like here, and the stop loss probably just below here, so maybe 9, just below these lows, and you could maybe target up to this. So that's just a solid 1 to 3, 1 to 4 risk-reward ratio trade. You can, of course, tighten the stop loss. But this will, of course, it will take a long time to play, but that's just something to also look at as well. The VIX is like near key critical support. We need to see if we can actually hold that. The gold chart is also something I'm also looking at as well. So legends, a lot of you know, and I even posted this in real time. I actually mentioned this long setup actually, which I took as well. And it's just been a really nice setup at, eventually we got this run up here. So essentially when we were at this support, so you can see how this long setup was around here. And I called it and I entered it. And now a lot of the take profits have now been hit. I closed it at 19.75, like 60% of it. And what happened here was that we have that monthly resistance here for gold. So here you can see how here this was the key resistance here, and we actually went above it. And if you can see in the lower times, we actually had a false breakout. So it's amazing how this technical analysis and principles work on any asset. Gold sometimes trades a bit nicer than Bitcoin, but this is a nice short position I called and I also took in real time. And so yeah, my take profit was 1960. And so it's just amazing to see how things have played out now. We could get a bounce here as well. That's something to consider. I would expect gold to still put new highs later on this year. It's hard to know exactly, around 2.2k at least. But so far, it seems that this, on the weekly, it does seem like a bit of a uptrend so far. And on the daily chart, this could be a brief pullback. We'll have to see where we go with this. Yeah, but this 1985 level, it seems to be somewhat of a resistance. And this is essentially this key area of demand, this order block here. So between 1945 to 1955 is like a support box, and if we break below there, then we could go down all the way to here. That's just something else I'm looking at as well for full context. Then US 100. What I've been noticing is this. So a lot of the time, the US 100 seems to have a similar movement to Bitcoin. Sometimes it can give close. And particularly this last week, we can see how we had this run up here. And then from Wednesday onwards, the US 100 or NASDAQ has actually been bleeding. This actually started coinciding with Bitcoin's bleeding. And so the key question I want to ask is, will actually the US 100 NASDAQ actually hold above this key 15255 level? Because if we actually hold above it, then that's kind of good for bulls. But if we break below it and we actually go down to this support box around, because if we break below, there's actually nothing really to here, so 14.8 to 14.4. And if we go down there, then potentially Bitcoin, crypto could potentially go down to 27K. There's nothing stopping it from going there. So this is something else I'm also looking at as well. Then, of course, let's look at Bitcoin dominance. You can see how, looking at Bitcoin dominance, particularly we have this macro trend line. So essentially, I've drawn it from many years back. So this is actually from 2016, first touch point. Second touch point is here, 72%. Now, the next touch point, if we do have a pushback here, so around 58K, 57%. So if we actually go up here, that is not out of the realm of possibility. And I would expect a tag of 58%. Do we get 60 or 70%? We don't know. There's an argument that the crypto market is developing and more altcoins are getting market share. But still possible. But you can see also, I also mentioned how 52% was a potential local resistance and a brief pullback, because also this is also a support box on the way up. So what's support on the way up can sometimes become resistance on the way up. And what happened now is, particularly if you draw Fibonacci from this point to this point here, you can see how we've actually rejected of this now, 38, 382 Fibonacci, 52%. So we'll have to see where we go with that effectively as well. And the problem is that when Bitcoin eventually does have a push up like this, you don't want to be in a situation where you're holding so many altcoins, because the altcoins can really bleed badly. And again, I'm not saying it can go up in US dollar value, but relatively it can be losing Satoshi to Bitcoins. So legends, that's all. It's a quick, brief market update. I hope this session was helpful. And of course, do check out my YouTube channel. This is where I post my market updates, my passion for crypto and trading, and to really help you in your trading process and investing career.